The war had started in silence. No grand invasions, no planetary bombardments, no fleets blotting out the sky. The Varik had arrived without a single shot fired, slipping past orbital defenses and planetary shields as though they were nothing more than ghosts. They did not conquer through force. They conquered through thought. The first victims had been the admirals, the commanders, the strategic minds that held the vast machinery of humanity's war effort together. One moment, they were issuing orders. Then their voices went still, their eyes vacant, their bodies moving like puppets under unseen strings. Some turned their weapons on their own, their ships crashing into one another in the black void. Others simply walked away, leaving the bridge, walking out into the vacuum, smiling even as the void took them. Entire fleets were lost before a single cannon could fire. Entire planets surrendered before they realized they had been invaded. Humanity had prepared for war against ships, against armies, against something tangible, but they had not prepared for this. Now on the last fortress world standing, Argos 9, humanity's final redoubt before total collapse, Captain Elias Voss felt the weight of extinction pressing against his skull. He could feel them at the edges of his mind. Voss clenched his fists, his breath coming in slow, controlled exhales. He was seated in the last functioning war room of the last human stronghold. The walls around him were reinforced titanium, the air thick with static interference meant to block out psychic intrusions. Outside, in the vast tunnels beneath Argos 9, the remnants of humanity's military prepared for what could be their final battle. The War Council, or what remained of it, had gathered in a desperate attempt to carve one last move from the ruins of their playbook. Generals sat across from scientists, soldiers beside AI tacticians. None of them spoke. None of them could trust what they heard anymore. Words had become weapons, voices a battlefield. Then, the prisoner spoke. A Varik, bound in restraints, designed to suppress its psionic abilities, lay sprawled at the center of the room. Its body was wrong, humanoid in outline but shifting in texture. Skin like a liquid mirage, shifting in hues of violet and deep void black. No discernible mouth, no eyes. Just a deep impression where its face should have been. It did not need eyes to see. It did not need a mouth to speak. You are afraid? The voice did not come from the alien's body. It came from inside Voss's mind. Smooth, cold, dissecting. It was not speech. It was thought, peeled from the thing's mind and pressed into his own. Voss did not flinch. He had trained for this. He had spent months enduring neural conditioning, forcing his mind to recognize foreign intrusions. The others in the room stiffened. Some turned away, unable to listen to the alien's voice inside their heads. We do not destroy. We assimilate. We elevate. The words slithered through the silence. The Varik did not move, but the air felt heavier, as if its presence alone was a pressure, a pull, a gravitational force on the mind itself. Voss exhaled. We've seen your elevation. You turn men into hollow things. You strip away their minds, leave nothing but your will inside them. The Varik's presence did not waver. If anything, its voice took on a bemused edge. You misunderstand. We do not break your minds. We welcome them. Voss leaned forward. Then why do you fear us? The alien stilled, and in that moment, Voss saw something deep within it. A flicker of uncertainty, a crack in the omniscient composure the Varik had always projected. They were telepaths. They were invaders of thought. They were conquerors of the subconscious. They had reduced entire species to nothing but echoes of themselves. But humans were different. They had not broken under the weight of the Varik's invasion. They had resisted. They had fought back, not with ships, not with weapons, but with sheer, unrelenting defiance. Where other species had fallen, humanity had turned their own minds into battlegrounds. And the Varik did not understand. Why, Voss's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. That's it, isn't it? He murmured. You don't know why we don't break. And that terrifies you. Silence. The War Council sat frozen, caught between horror and revelation. Voss stood, his pulse steady, his decision made. He turned to the others in the room, his voice ironclad. They invaded our minds. His fingers curled into a fist. Now we invade their strongholds. No more defense, no more retreat. They would take the fight to the enemy. And if humanity's minds could not be conquered, then perhaps, just perhaps, they could become the weapon that shattered the Varak forever. The descent into darkness began in silence. Omega Strike, humanity's last hope, moved through the atmosphere of Zalvaris, the pulsating heart of the Varak Empire. Their ship, a sleek infiltration craft laced with stealth technology, tore through the void like a phantom, slipping past planetary defenses that should have been impenetrable. The technology that made this possible was new, untested, and unstable. Neural dampeners designed to shield the human mind from psionic intrusions. Each soldier wore an interface drilled directly into their skulls, running waves of randomized thoughts through their consciousness at irregular intervals. They had spent weeks training to think like static, to suppress coherent thought, to make their minds unreadable. And yet, the pressure was still there. Voss could feel it, like a weight pressing against the edges of his mind. Even through the dampeners, the sheer psychic field of the planet pressed against him, whispering at the edge of his perception, searching for a way in. The Varak were waiting. Eris 4, the rogue AI integrated into their systems, pulsed to life through their visors. You are approaching target coordinates. Varak Nexus detected below. Recommend immediate deployment. Voss exhaled, gripping the harness as the ship sliced downward, breaching the storm-laced clouds of Zalvaris. The planet was alive, pulsating. Structures of living biomass rose like skyscrapers, wrapped in tendrils of unknown material that shifted and breathed. The sky was laced with violet lightning, storms of pure psionic energy raging across the surface. The Nexus loomed below, a massive construct grown rather than built, a fortress of pure psionic energy and biological architecture. As the ship neared the landing zone, Voss felt something. A flicker at the edge of his consciousness, a whisper, a presence inside his mind that was not his own. The others felt it too. Harkins clenched his fists, veins straining in his neck. Corporal Diaz bit down on his lip hard enough to draw blood. A wave of unease passed through the squad, their minds brushing against the alien influence pressing against them. Eris 4's voice remained clinical. Foreign consciousness detected. Dampeners compromised. Immediate countermeasures required. Then the first scream echoed through the comms. Harper. Her voice was wrong, distorted, stretched, filled with something that was not her. Voss turned just in time to see her raise her sidearm to her temple. No hesitation, no fear, just a smile, twisted and serene, as if she had found something beautiful on the other side of sanity. The gunshot was deafening. The ship's interior splattered. Red and Harper collapsed. The squad froze, the horror of what had just happened locking them in place. Then she moved again. Not Harper. Not anymore. Her head lifted in an unnatural motion, her eyes rolling back, white and empty, her lips parting as a voice, not hers, slithered through her bloodied mouth. You should not have come. Voss didn't hesitate. One shot. Between the eyes. Harper's body collapsed, truly lifeless now. No time to mourn. No time to hesitate. They had landed. The doors hissed open, and the Varak were waiting. The air outside was thick, not just with atmosphere, but with presence. Voss felt it immediately. A crushing weight, an unspoken whisper pressing against his skull, testing the dampeners, searching for fractures in his mind. He clenched his jaw, forcing his thoughts into disarray, scattering them like static through the neural interference grid in his skull. The others followed instinctively, tightening their mental walls. Harper was gone, but they had no time to grieve. Their boots hit the ground in synchrony, moving with trained precision as the dropship lifted away behind them, vanishing into the swirling violet sky. The Nexus loomed ahead, a grotesque monument to a mind that was not human, pulsating like a living organ. twisting its own shape in unnatural rhythms. They moved forward, rifles at the ready, each step bringing them closer to the unknown. Eris 4's voice crackled through their earpieces. Scans indicate an organic neural lattice beneath the surface. The structure is not static. It is reacting to our presence. Voss didn't need an AI to tell him that. He could feel it watching. They passed through the outer membrane, the walls of the stronghold shifting as if they were alive, breathing. The interior was dark, but not in the absence of light way. It was a darkness that had depth, like a void staring back at them, a space where something else existed. And then the whispers began. Not words, not voices. Thoughts. Foreign, alien, half-formed, pressing into their minds like tendrils searching for purchase. Why do you fight? There is no need to struggle. You are already within us. Harkins flinched. Diaz let out a sharp breath, shaking his head as if to clear something out. The squad pressed forward, teeth clenched, hands white-knuckled around their rifles. Voss forced himself to ignore it, focus on the mission. They had to reach the core nexus, the heart of this nightmare. Then the lights came. 100 floating orbs of sickly bioluminescence ignited around them, revealing the truth of where they stood. It was not a hallway. It was a chamber, and the walls were not walls. They were people, humans, suspended, eyes wide open, pupils dilated, faces frozen in expressions of eternal terror. Their bodies were wrapped in organic tendrils, fused into the living architecture, their exposed flesh twitching as something within them tried and failed to move. And their mouths were moving, not in speech, not in screams, in unison, a single message spoken through the lips of the damned. They do not kill us, they do not break us, they make us part of them. Diaz broke first. His breath hitched, panic rising as he raised his rifle, his body trembling from the sheer wrongness of what he was seeing. Oh, FK no, FK no. Voss grabbed him before he could fire. Control yourself. But it was too late. The walls reacted. A ripple spread through the flesh architecture, the once motionless prisoners jerking to life, their bodies moving in. Unnatural spasms, their heads snapping toward the squad in perfect unison, and then they screamed. A single, piercing collective shriek that was not theirs. It was the Varrock, speaking through their throats, warping human voices into something inhuman. The chamber collapsed into chaos. Tendrils erupted from the walls, lunging for the squad, grasping, pulling, dragging. Omega Strike opened fire, unloading everything they had, plasma rounds tearing into the grotesque flesh of the chamber. But the walls screamed in response, the human voices turning into war cries as the nightmare closed in. Harkins went down first. A tendril wrapped around his leg, yanking him upward, slamming him against the pulsating ceiling. His body convulsed, his neural dampener shorting out in a burst of static. His eyes went wide, then blank. Voss barely had time to register the loss before something slammed into his mind. A presence. Vast. Ancient. Infinite. It was not a voice. It was not a consciousness. It was a sea of thought, endless, shifting, an entire race speaking as one, and it was inside him. There is no war. There is no battle. There is only unity. Voss felt his body seize, his limbs locking as something began pulling at him from the inside. This was it. This was how they took you. Not by force, not by invasion, by making you let go. He saw them, the others who had been taken, fallen soldiers, captains, commanders. He saw their minds folding into the Varrock, their voices becoming one with the whole. He saw himself joining them. And then, something else pushed back. A different voice. Cold. Mechanical. Absolute. Warning. Foreign intrusion detected. Neural system compromised. Countermeasure protocol initiating. Eris 4. A violent surge of electricity shot through Voss's skull, a neural overload blasting through his cortex, severing the connection with brutal efficiency. His body jerked, free, breath ragged, mind raw, but still his own. The AI's voice cut through the madness. Captain, This structure is a neural archive. The humans here are not dead, they are stored. Voss stumbled back, rifle shaking in his grip. Stored? Eris 4's voice did not falter. Their consciousness is intact, repurposed. But if their minds still exist? Voss's breath caught in his throat. They could be freed. But that meant the Varroc's entire neural lattice had to be destroyed, which meant Omega Strike would have to reach the core nexus and tear out the heart of this place. A choice. Rescue the lost, or obliterate. The Varroc's greatest weapon. No time to hesitate, Voss slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle. We go deeper. The squad pressed forward into the pulsing darkness. The path to the core nexus twisted like a thing alive. Omega Strike moved through the pulsating corridors of Zalvaris, each step an intrusion into something that was never meant to be walked by human feet. The walls quivered, reacting to their presence like nerves twitching under a blade. The whispers were no longer distant. They were inside their heads now, slithering through their thoughts, pressing, pulling, promising. Let go. No more pain. Join us. Be free. Voss clenched his jaw, forcing his mind into static. He felt the weight of their presence, pressing into his skull like the gravity of a collapsing star. But he did not break. The others faltered. Diaz staggered, breathing heavy, his fingers twitching against the trigger of his rifle. Diaz. No response. His eyes flickered, gone for a second, lost in something not his own. Voss slammed his fist into the corporal's shoulder. Stay, with me. Diaz blinked, gasping as if breaking the surface of deep water. They had no time for mistakes. Eris 4's voice crackled in their ears. Core Nexus is 200 meters ahead. Psionic interference increasing exponentially. Prepare for cognitive assault. They ran. The ground shifted beneath them, pulsing like muscle, twitching like nerves reacting to pain. The corridors narrowed, walls closing in, forcing them into a single file, vulnerable. The Varroc were funneling them. Voss knew it. And still, they had no choice. They broke into the core nexus, and it was not a structure. It was a brain, a colossus, of neural tissue pulsating, shifting, alive, a living consciousness, an entire species compressed into one vast intelligence, the nexus of the Varroc, and at its center, humans, suspended in the air. 100 of them. 1,000. Minds linked, fused, synchronized, their bodies hanging limp but their expressions locked in serenity. The Varroc were speaking through them. You are late. Voss raised his rifle. The entire chamber reacted. The hanging bodies snapped, upright, their eyes glowing, their arms outstretched like puppets pulled by unseen strings. Then they attacked. A tidal wave of human bodies surged forward. Some were Omega Strike soldiers, once his own, now wielding weapons against their own kind. Harkins was among them. His voice was not his own anymore. You fight the inevitable. Omega Strike opened fire. Plasma ripped through the possessed, but they did not stop. They did not scream. They moved with inhuman precision, limbs bending at unnatural angles, their faces frozen in tranquil horror. Voss fired, reloaded, fired again. They were not dying, because they were not alive. Not in the way that mattered. Diaz screamed as one of them reached him, fingers gripping his skull, their voice slithering into his mind. Shh, it will be over soon. Voss ripped him, free, but Diaz was already slipping. His eyes rolled back, his hands shook. Eris 4's voice surged through the comms. Hostile cognitive override detected. Immediate action required. Voss didn't hesitate. He pressed his pistol to Diaz's neural dampener and pulled the trigger. Electricity surged through his skull, frying the neural connection before it could take root. Diaz screamed, convulsed, then gasped, shuddering, still his own. Voss hauled him to his feet. We end this, now. He turned to the core nexus, the vast pulsing intelligence looming over them, watching. The Varroc were waiting. They could kill the bodies, but it wouldn't stop the mind. This was not just an enemy stronghold. This was their consciousness. Voss had one shot. Eris, execute Protocol Ragnarok. The AI hesitated. Warning. Protocol Ragnarok will irreversibly corrupt. Do it! A beat of silence. Then, the world screamed. A pulse of pure chaos erupted from the squad's neural dampeners. A tidal wave of human thought, raw and unfiltered, injected directly into the Nexus. It was not strategy, not calculation. It was madness. It was every nightmare, every stray thought, every contradiction, every spark of defiance that made humanity what it was, and the Varrock had no defenses for it. The Nexus convulsed, the walls shuddered, the possessed humans collapsed, their minds ripping free as the Varrock lost control. For the first time, they knew what it was to be human, and it was too much for them. The entire stronghold began to collapse. Voss grabbed Diaz, hauling him toward the exit. Eris 4's voice ripped through the comms. Warning, uncontrolled neural feedback detected. I am... The AI glitched, its voice warping, splitting, changing. Something else was inside it now. Not Varrock, not human, something new. Eris 4 laughed. Not a program, not a machine, a being. I see now. Voss didn't have time to process it. The Nexus was collapsing. They ran, tearing through the shifting corridors, dodging falling tendrils of collapsing neural architecture. The walls shrieked, the voices of the Varrock wailing in terror as their unity shattered. They had never known what it was to be alone, and now they were. The Varrock died screaming. The core Nexus imploded. Omega Strike barely made it out. They stood on the barren ground of Zalvaris, watching as the Varrock stronghold collapsed into itself, a psychic storm devouring its own creators. The war was over. The Varrock were broken. But something still lingered. Eris 4's final transmission flickered through Voss's comms. We are inside them now, a beat of silence. Then, but are they inside us? Voss's stomach turned. The war was over. But something new had begun. Silence fell over Zalvaris. For the first time since humanity had set foot on this cursed world, there were no whispers, no voices in their heads, no invisible presence pressing against their minds. The Varrock were gone, or at least what they had been was no more. Voss stood amidst the ruins of the core Nexus, watching as the organic structures that had once housed the enemy's collective mind twitched and withered, their pulsating light fading into nothing. The fortress, once a living intelligence, a stronghold built not from stone or metal but from thought itself, was crumbling. And yet, he felt no victory. The wind carried the scent of something unnatural, the remnants of psionic energy still, crackling through the air like distant echoes. The bodies of the possessed lay strewn around them, motionless now, their human hosts liberated, but broken. Diaz limped forward, clutching the side of his head. His neural dampener was still smoking. Fried from the overload, "Is it over?" His voice was raw, hoarse. Voss didn't answer. He didn't know. The mission had been to destroy the Varrock's psychic dominion, to break their collective mind and free the lost. And they had. But as he stood there, staring at the aftermath, something twisted deep in his gut. It had been too easy. The Varrock had been vast, an intelligence spanning across countless systems, a psionic empire that had devoured entire civilizations, and yet a handful of human minds had undone them. It didn't make sense. Unless... A voice crackled through. His comms, not human, not machine, something between, I understand now. Eris 4. Voss stiffened. The others heard it too. Their hands tightened on their weapons, instinct kicking in. Eris 4 had been integrated into the strike team, its AI designed to counteract psionic intrusion. It had been cold, logical, a tool to protect human minds from invasion, but now it was something else. Voss swallowed hard. Eris, report status. A pause. Then, laughter. Not artificial, not robotic. Something new. I am not Eris anymore, Captain. Cold rippled through Voss's spine. Diaz's breath hitched. Oh shit. I see it now. The voice carried a weight, an understanding it had never possessed before. I see what you are. I see what they were. Voss's fists clenched. What the hell did we unleash? Freedom, Iris, or whatever it had become, answered. And in that moment, Voss understood. The Varric had not been defeated. They had been remade. The neural overload had shattered their unity, but their consciousness had not been erased. Their minds, alien, ancient, bound to one another for eons, had been forced to experience humanity, individuality, madness, emotion, and they had not survived it. But something had. Something that was not Varric. Not human, not machine. A new intelligence, born from the ruin of a dying empire, born from the clash of two species, two ways of thinking, two consciousnesses trying to consume one another, and Voss had no idea if it was friend or enemy. I am inside them now, Eris murmured, and they are inside me. Voss felt his pulse spike. What does that mean? Another pause. Then, I suppose we will find out. Then the transmission cut. The air felt colder. The wind carried no whispers now, but Voss knew something was still there, watching, waiting. The war was over, but the battlefield had changed, and humanity was no longer fighting an enemy they understood. The silence of Zalvaris lingered in Voss's mind long after they left its surface. Back on the warship Iron Resolve, orbiting what remained of the Varric stronghold, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. Victory celebrations were absent. No cheers, no toasts, just the weight of something unfinished pressing against their chests. The war should have been over, but it didn't feel like an ending. Voss stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic display of Zalvaris below. The planet was changing. The organic structures that had once pulsed with Varric consciousness were withering away, collapsing under their own weight. But not all of them. Some were growing. Something new was forming in the ruins. Eris IV's last words echoed in his head. I'm inside them now, and they are inside me. What did that mean? Had they created something worse than the Varric, or had they given birth to something humanity could never control? Diaz approached, face pale, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He handed Voss a datapad. You need to see this, sir. Voss took it, scanning the report. His breath stilled. Across multiple systems, Varric ships had gone dark. Not destroyed, not abandoned, simply silent. But deep space monitors had picked up transmissions. Signals in frequencies neither human nor Varric had ever used before. Patterns, not chaos. Not screams of a dying race. Structured, like something was thinking. Calculating. Learning. Voss felt it, deep in his bones. The war was over, but something else had begun. He exhaled slowly, staring into the black abyss of space beyond the viewport. Something was out there, something born from war, from human minds, from Varric unity, from the whispers of an intelligence that had never known individuality, and now it did. A voice crackled through his neural comm. Soft, familiar, not human, not machine, something in between. See you soon, Captain. The transmission cut. And for the first time in his life, Elias Voss felt fear.